Hello and welcome to the World Wonders podcast. I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda and we're your hosts. And today we've got a really awesome guest on. His name is Justin Greak. And we met Justin through the podcast. He was probably our first fan, I guess, who reached out to us. Maybe I should use the word listener. He was the first listener who reached out to us and kind of communicated with us that he really enjoyed the podcast, and we connected on Facebook with him, and we've kind of followed his travels since connecting with him.
Yeah, Justin travels a lot, and he is a teacher, so he doesn't do long-term trips like we do, but instead is able to go for quite a few short trips during the year, over the winter break, in the summer. So we wanted to get him on the podcast to talk about why travel is so important to him, how he saves for his trips, how he decides where he goes, and how it has really added value to him as a teacher.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's a really relatable topic for, anyone out there who has a full-time career that they don't feel like they can just up and quit right now. And, Justin's in that position, yet he's still managing to travel quite a bit. So if you have a career that you enjoy, or you just don't have the circumstances to leave right now, or you're choosing not to, Justin's got some fabulous tips for how to make travel happen within a career setting.
And you can find more about Justin at justingoesplaces.com.
Yeah, as well as he's on Instagram with Justin Goes Places. It's got this spectacular photo, so definitely follow him there. So without further ado, here's Justin. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, Justin. This is a pretty cool experience for us. We've had lots of different people on the podcast, but you're the first person that we've met actually through the podcast who is a fan of the podcast and then also of travel, obviously.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed listening to you guys. I actually discovered your podcast. I was planning a trip to Switzerland a couple of years ago, and so I was searching around for podcasts to learn a little bit more about Switzerland, and yours was one of the first one I came across. And I just really enjoyed your guys' kind of carefree style that you had. It was a lot different from some of the other podcasts that I had listened to.
Carefree is a nice way to say it.
Casual, unplanned banter.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I know. I think you added me on Facebook, because I think at the time it was before we actually had made the World Wonders page, maybe. But I had the World Wonders in my name, or as my job or something. And then I sent you a message I think you're looking for someone else. I'm probably not the Ryan Ferguson you're looking for.
Yeah. I think something like, it's a pretty common name, no big deal. No, I think you're the one.
So that was fun. So the reason we wanted to have Justin on the podcast was you've kind of made travel a big part of your life, but in a little bit different of a way than we have. Instead of long trips, you just go really frequently.
Yeah, we take, I'd say we take probably 5 trips a year, 6 trips, and we never do more than 2 weeks at a time. I'm a teacher, and so I get 3 months off in the summer, and I get a big 2-week break in the winter. And then I get, a couple of week-long breaks in the fall and spring. But my wife, Christina, who travels with me, she works in the insurance industry. And so she only gets 17 days off in the year. So we kind of have to strategically do our trips over holidays and over weekends so we can kind of maximize the days she gets off. But yeah, we've never done any long-term trips or anything like that. It's just kind of quick in and out. 10 to 12 day visits for the most part.
I think that's super cool because, the average person works a full-time job. Most people aren't like Ryan and I, where they're like, hey, let's just sell all our stuff and quit our jobs and just go travel the world.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, I can't do that. But I still want to travel. And how do I make that work? And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk to you, because I feel like you really take advantage of working as a teacher and having this time off and then coordinating it with Christina as well, which is super cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And so what's the planning sort of process of that? How do you guys go about doing that?
Usually the first thing I do is wherever we're going, I'll usually buy a couple of travel guides for that place. And I always start like a Word document or something. And when I see something interesting in the book, I'll make a note of it in my document. And usually by the time we go on the trip, I've, filled out 3 or 4 pages of just notes of things to do. I'll download a bunch of podcasts. I usually seek out different blogs of travelers that have been to the area. Reddit is sort of like a big tool for me. I use the Reddit travel community to help plan. And I'll also go to like the subreddits of the local, country that I'll be visiting, and I'll ask for recommendations on kind of how to get away from the more touristy things. We kind of like to do the off the beaten path kind of travel. And then something I've started doing recently that's kind of been a big help is there's an app called My Google Maps. It's different from just like the regular Google Maps, where you can actually pen like different things and make notes about them. And so when you're on the ground there, you can just pull up your Google map and you can kind of look at, where you're at currently and see what's around, see all the things that you've penned prior to the trip. That's
super cool. Is that how you make the maps on your website?
Yeah, in the travel map section. So usually after I've taken the trip, I usually post the little planning map I've made up there to help people who might be going to the same area.
Yeah. Was that sort of the intention of starting Justin Goes Places as like a way to kind of capture your travels and then to help like other people, since blogs help you so much?
Yeah, I never really had a clear focus when I made the website. I guess it kind of originally started as a way to just help me remember my trips, kind of a way to put my thoughts down and go back and have a written record of everything. And then I was trying to think, do I want to do something more with this blog? And I was toying around with the idea of like starting up a way of helping other people plan. Because that's one of my favorite things to do is just plan trips. And all my time off, I'm just sitting here at my computer, like looking at destinations or, finding other things to do.
That's awesome. So many people hate trip planning, so that's super cool.
Yeah, I would love to be a travel agent if it weren't a dying industry. But I kind of toyed with the idea of having some kind of service and actually made a Google form where people could fill out their travel preferences, how they like to travel, so that I could help them plan their trip. And I did that for a few people, but ultimately I'm spending too much time planning my own trips, and it was just a little bit too time consuming. So now it's just a way to, kind of give back to all the bloggers that I read that help me plan trips. It's just kind of my contribution. People can visit my blog and kind of read about where I've been, and it might help them plan.
And so in the last little while, you went to Austria over Christmas, right?
Yeah, that was our latest trip. We were in Austria and Germany. We spent 4 nights in Salzburg, and then we took a bunch of day trips around there. And then we went to Innsbruck, which is in the western kind of leg of Austria, like right in the heart of the Alps there. Spent a couple days there, and then we drove up into like Bavaria, Germany, Schwangau and Füssen, and then up into Heidelberg, because we were departing out of Frankfurt. So we wanted to kind of base ourselves near Frankfurt. So that was a bit of a drive to get up to Heidelberg. It's like 4 hours from our previous stop. But yeah, that was a really fun trip. We had a great time.
And then before that, you had been to Iceland in the summer, and I think Switzerland the year before that, or?
Yeah. We usually try and take at least one big like overseas trip a year. Iceland was our big trip for this summer. We spent 10 days there. And we actually, I guess less than a month after we came back from Iceland, we went to St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Okay.
So there's like a big contrast there with, being near the Arctic Circle. And then a month later, we were down near the equator. And then, like you said, the summer before that, we did Switzerland, which was actually our first trip into Europe.
Oh, that's awesome.
So when did you, when was your first time traveling out of the U.S.?
Growing up, my parents always took me and my brother traveling, and that's kind of what laid the foundation for my future travels. My dad worked in Canada for a little while in Windsor, just across from Detroit. Mm-hmm. And so he met a lot of people through his job up there, and he would fly me out to visit with the people he knew, and I would stay out there with them. So Canada was actually my first out of the country trip. I think it was maybe 14 or 15. And they took us to Mexico a few times because that's pretty close to where we live here in Houston. But yeah, those were my first non-American trips.
Yeah, my growing up was pretty similar to that. Like, I guess reverse, like the US was the first place I had been outside of Canada, and then did lots of trips to like Mexico and stuff like that with my family. My family really liked to like do vacations though. Like when we went to like Mexico or Hawaii, we did sort of like the all-inclusive on a beach, resorty type vacation. Was your experience sort of similar to that, or?
Yeah, we took a lot of cruises growing up, which I really enjoyed when I was younger, just because we would get to, I'd meet a lot of friends and we'd visit a whole bunch of different places, but it was a lot different type of travel than I do now. Yeah. I don't ever see myself getting back on a cruise ship or anything like that. And then we did the all-inclusive thing too. Christina and I did that ourselves. Actually, in 2011, we went to Antigua in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. And this was prior to us really having any interest in travel. It was more just, we're 25, 26 years old. We want to go party and drink all we can, this all-inclusive resort kind of thing. And we never actually left the resort. I kind of look back on that now and like, God, I would never travel like that again. It was fun at the time, but it's, we were kind of different people then.
Yeah, so totally.
What is there? Sorry.
I was going to say, it's funny that you say that, because the last time I went to Mexico, I did the same thing with a group of girlfriends, and I'm like, I actually did that, and now I'm like, call myself a traveler. But yeah. I think that it's cool to have those experiences and then see how you like kind of find your own way of traveling outside of that.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think sparked the change to go from, you're just like, oh, we're 25, 26, want to go on a vacation, to like, oh, I want to go on adventures out of the country a couple times every year?
I don't know. I think it was a trip we took to Portland in 2012, Portland, Oregon. We'd always wanted to go there because we're both vegetarians, and Portland was sort of like this vegetarian mecca. Like coming from Houston, it's all, barbecue and just, it's very meat heavy. And so we always kind of looked at Portland as like this amazing place we wanted to go. So we went there just expecting sort of a big city. We were just going to go there for eating. When we got there, it was just, so much hiking to be done. We, did some hiking through the Columbia River Gorge and saw a bunch of waterfalls. It was kind of then we're like, okay, wow, there's a lot more to travel than just like going and partying and, drinking all you can. It was, that kind of sparked our interest in hiking. And then from there, I kind of looked at travel as a way to get out into nature over really, doing anything else. So that's sort of my main goal now in traveling, is just being in nature as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that like living in a city, it's nice to have those like extended periods of time where you're kind of out of the city and in just like the trees or the mountains or like by a creek or something like that.
Right. And yeah, living in Houston, I mean, it's a very boring city. We live in the floodplains. It's a concrete jungle essentially. So that also has kind of helped spark our need to, kind of get out and see the world, just because there's not a whole lot going on here in this part of the world.
There's a lot of really high overpasses that are constantly like on top of each other in Houston.
Yeah, that was the thing we were most amazed about in Texas. Just the infrastructure was a little absurd.
Yeah, they have a spot in Houston they call the Spaghetti Bowl, and it's where like, I don't know, 6 or 7 different highways all converge, and it's just like a giant mess of highways overlapping each other.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've never really seen anything quite that intricate. I guess I've been to Dallas before we went to Austin, so I remember Dallas kind of being like that too. But we drove over one, and we were so high up that I was like, I feel like I'm on a roller coaster right now. It was crazy.
I think that you guys might have gone on it as you were heading to Austin. I think we have one of like the widest highways in the world. I think it might be part of I-10 or something like that. It's just mind-bogglingly huge. It's like 10 lanes wide or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. That's one of the biggest differences about being in the US, I think, as opposed to Canada. Our roads just aren't that wide.
Right.
I'm like constantly overwhelmed by the interstates.
Yeah, it can definitely overwhelm.
So I think one of the things around travel that people seem to struggle with the most is like having a budget or, finding a way to save. Do you have any sort of advice on how you guys save for your trips?
Yes. I tend to plan our trip. Flights don't usually go on sale until, like 10 or 11 months prior to a trip. But being that I plan so far out, like 5 different savings accounts, and they're all named for different countries we'll be visiting. And I set up an automatic transfer to each of those with like $5 or $10 a day, just automatically from our savings. Each of these little destinations. And so by the time the year is up, we usually have enough money already saved up there that when we get on the ground in the country, we don't have to really worry too much about spending, because we've already got, we've just saved little by little on the lead up. So that's probably my best advice on saving for a trip. Just save little by little over a long period of time. You don't really notice those little bits of money that go out every day.
So you just have like a setting on your bank account that just withdraws that small amount of money each day to a different account?
Yeah, you can set up just an automatic transfer, and you can set the limits of when you want the start date to be, and if you want it to be daily or if you want it to be monthly, you can bi-weekly or whatever. Saving right now for the trip I'm taking in June up to the Canadian Rockies up there in Banff and Canmore and everything, and I have that set up to just pull out $100 from every paycheck. So by the time we get up there, I'll have pretty much all my expenses covered.
Yeah, and at the rate the Canadian dollar is going, you'll be able to buy like half of Banff.
That's a huge plus for us. We noticed that when we went to Quebec City last Christmas. That was our Christmas trip, and it was the first place we had traveled where our dollar was worth so much more. It's like, okay, yeah, this beer is $6 Canadian, so or $3 Canadian ends up being like $1.50 in the US. We're like, okay, we were just buying everything we could.
Yeah, no, that's awesome for you guys. Like working in Banff last summer was interesting because there's so many American tourists there. And I worked in retail and they're just like shopping their faces off because it's basically like 25% off.
Yeah, it's like a free for all. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a friend down in Atlanta and she's like, yeah, one of my good friends went up to Canada for Christmas and was just like, wow, it is so cheap up here. Like our dollar's so great. And I was like, yeah, guys, I get it.
Yeah.
No, that's really awesome advice though. Like I find that I don't have too hard of a time saving just because I'm usually so motivated about where I want to go. But I know it is something that it's probably like the biggest question we get from people is like, how do you budget? How do you budget? How do you budget? And I feel like everyone's so different. But setting an automatic withdrawal is a good idea because, $5 a day is like your daily Starbucks drink. You don't notice that coming out. So
exactly.
Yeah, you probably go ahead. Sorry.
What is your guys' kind of strategy for saving for a trip?
I have a budget app on my phone called Back in Black. And it's like really straightforward. You can just like set your savings goals and your expenses. Your expenses like go over each month. And then you can see how much you make in a month. You can enter that in. And then I really like it because it has different categories. So it lets me see like very clearly where I've spent my money. So after a few months of using it, like I started using it a few years ago, and I was like, wow, I spend, you know, a lot of money on like food and drinks with my friends. Like I should start being aware of how much my, you know, tab is when we go out for drinks or when we go out for food.
Right.
And then coffee as well. Coffee's a huge one. So many people are like, oh yeah, coffee here. Like it's so immaterial. But when you do it constantly, it becomes like pretty significant.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then the other big thing, I think after getting back from our trip to South America, we really wanted to be able to create a life where we could travel and work at the same time. So starting a podcast was like, it's like a hobby, but you know, it's like slowly been growing. And hopefully within the next maybe year, we can get to a point where we can make income that's completely remote from, you know, podcasting, other side projects, and create a life where we're able to just, we want to go work. We're going to go to Colombia. And then we just go there and continue doing everything we're doing, but we're just doing it from somewhere new. So
gosh, if I could figure out the secret to combining travel with a career like that, I mean, that's the ultimate question for me that, you know, I've been trying to figure out. So that would be really cool if you guys were able to, you know, get your podcast sponsored and just have a way to work remotely and all that. A lot of the travel podcasts I listen to, they always start off with, you know, some kind of sponsorship. So,
yeah. So in your ideal future, how much do you think you'd be traveling?
I mean, I travel a pretty good deal now. And that's good and everything, but I don't know. Ultimately, I would love to be able to work remotely from somewhere and just be able to travel constantly. I don't know how realistic that is. I haven't really figured out a way to make that work, especially being a teacher. I mean, I've been a teacher for 10 years, and so I don't really see myself moving into a different kind of career after I've been with something for so long. You know, I'm sure it's possible, but I'm getting to a point where I'm sort of, you know, stuck in my ways, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as I know we know a few other teachers who really, one of the things that really drove them into teaching was that, I can teach, I can travel in the summer, I can travel over Christmas because there are such good holidays. But then it seems like a lot of people who have those aspirations eventually like lose touch with them. How do you think you've maintained this? Like, I'm going to take advantage of the time I have.
I don't know. I've always kind of said that even if I didn't love my job, I would still have to do it just because of all the time off that I have. And luckily, I actually enjoy my job, but I don't know. Just having those 3 months off every year is just amazing. I mean, it's hard not to take advantage of that. That's sort of what got us into travel to begin with is, you know, I had all this time off and it's like, okay, we're really doing not a lot of, you know, we're not really taking advantage of this 3 months that I have every year. And so we decided we needed to really jump on that and take advantage.
And it must be awesome for, I don't know how much you talk about travel in your class, but it must be awesome to have, for like the students, to have someone to look up to who's actually getting all this like worldly experience.
Yeah, I love to share with my students. You know, I teach math and science, and I always say, I never stop being a science teacher because when we're on a hike, I'll be like, oh, there's a tree growing through that rock causing weathering, and I'm like taking pictures of that to show the kids, like, look, guys, you're, like seeing glaciers and sort of like photographing those to show the kids, because being from Texas, they don't really have any concept of what a glacier is. You know, when I ask them what's a glacier, they're like, oh, that's a thing that sunk the Titanic. I'm like, no, that's an iceberg. So here's an actual glacier. And, you know, it helps them wrap their heads around it when their teacher has actually seen it and has some pictures to show them. And then when we were in Austria, we were doing a hike up in the mountains, and I'm always just looking down. And I see this rock, and it's got these glacial scrapes, like striations all through it. So of course I threw that in my pocket, and as soon as I got back in the classroom, I'm like, check it out, guys. There's a glacier scraped this rock.
That's so
So
cool.
I'm always thinking about that kind of stuff, just ways to bring it back to the classroom.
How old or what grade are you teaching?
I teach fourth grade this year, so they're 9 and 10 years old. And then I taught fifth grade prior for the last 8 years, I think. So this is my first year teaching a younger grade. And I did my student teaching with 7th and 8th graders, so I kind of worked with all age levels.
Oh, 7th and 8th graders. I feel like that'd be difficult.
Yeah, that's a rough age level for kids. They're sort of, the hormones are in full effect, and
yeah, you're kind of just like awkward at that age, and you don't really like understand what's going on in your body. I feel like those are like kind of some of the hardest years to be in, like the public school system, where there's so many kids who are like, you're weird.
Yeah, that's a real rough year for a lot of kids.
Yeah, it's cool. I think that there's a lot of like great teachers who can like help those children through those times, though, which is awesome.
Yeah. And so, just bringing it back to travel, I like to share the culture with my students as well. When I come back from a trip, we have a share time every morning where the kids will, talk about their weekend, or I'll, give some kind of lesson. And I always like to come back and just tell them about the places I visited, and, how different the culture is and how different it is to go to school there. And they always think, they love to hear that kind of stuff. They think that's really cool to hear about such different places. So many kids don't really get the opportunities to travel, and so they don't get exposure to anything outside of the little bubble they live in. So It's really nice to hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really awesome that you're bringing that to students, because like I even think about when I was young, like the first place I ever went was Disneyland, and I was in grade 3, and then I didn't go anywhere outside of like Canada or the US till I was in grade 7. And even then it was at a resort in Mexico, barely went off the resort, didn't really see anything else. So it wasn't until I was like well into my teens that I was like, whoa, people live like so differently from how I live.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest things that have changed, or like that you have learned by traveling more frequently compared to someone like maybe your social group, people who haven't really left Texas that much, or coworkers?
It's just helped me see the different mindsets. I mean, if I were to never leave Houston, I would only, hear that one side of the story. Everyone kind of thinks the same way, and just being exposed to different ways of thinking, different types of food, different ways of living. I guess that's probably the biggest thing I see. Just getting that exposure, I guess.
Do you find it allows you to get like better perspective on the things you're doing at home and like make changes personal development wise?
I don't know that I've had any like earth-shattering revelations or anything in my travels. It's just sort of more like a hobby. Maybe the only thing I've really learned about myself is that I really do love like hiking and being in the mountains and things like that. That's something I never had hardly any exposure to living around here. And once I, kind of got bit by that bug, it's all I ever want to do now. It's just be in the mountains constantly. Yeah,
there's something about them for sure.
I think it's made me definitely a more active person at home too. I never was much into exercise or anything like that. And ever since we kind of got into hiking, I've really taken up exercising and always getting ready for the next hike. And so it's definitely made me a better person in that way.
Has it helped you to like appreciate anything or see things differently at home in any way?
It definitely makes me realize that there is more to life than just kind of sitting around and doing nothing, I guess. There's just so much to see and so much that I want to see in the world. And it's made me strive to kind of get out more and see more, I'd say.
Do you find yourself like more curious about like restaurants and places in Houston and Texas and that sort of thing? Or is it kind of just mostly like outside of the US?
Probably mostly just outside of the US. When we're back in Houston, we just kind of go through our little routine. We work and we, just do the simple things. So it's usually just when we're out of the country that we kind of get out of our comfort zone. I mean, being in Houston, I don't know, what do you mean by like in terms of restaurants or whatever?
I guess like sometimes I find that when I'm really settled, like exactly like you were talking about, like I'm kind of in my routine. Like I'll go to the same like coffee shops. I like the same, like 4 restaurants. And then I go on a trip and I'm like, oh wow, there's like so much more in a city than, I ever really realize. And then I'll come home and I'll kind of be inspired to try new things or to, experience the things in the city that I'm from that maybe somebody who is just visiting would do and I haven't done. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess in a way, yeah, we really haven't. I mean, I guess we don't really know our own hometown that well just because, it's just so common to us that we don't really try and get out and explore those things that we haven't ever done. We always go to the same little area in Houston and go to the same little restaurants and, we just do the same things. So I guess in that way, maybe if we lived in a more interesting city, we might be more motivated to get out and do things. But yeah, we haven't really done that as far as living here in Houston.
Yeah, I think that like regardless of where you live, it can sometimes be like hard. Like even living in like Banff, there's so many Australians who like come over to work there, and I worked with a ton of Australians who were just every single day hiking, exploring something new, and I was like, whoa guys, you're like going a little bit crazy, but kind of made me see that because I grew up like right outside of that area, so like the Rocky Mountains are nothing new to me. I like literally have seen them my whole life. I was like, wow, I should actually get out and appreciate these a little bit more. And working in retail, I heard so many tourists were like, you haven't done this hike yet? Like, what are you doing living here? And I was like, okay, I should probably get out and explore a bit more, I guess.
So it's interesting to see the opposite side. What I look at that area up there is such an amazingly beautiful place. It's interesting to see that, someone that just lives there, it's just kind of like a, blah kind of thing. Like, oh yeah, I've seen that mountain before. And
it's definitely not blah, but yeah, it does become like, I remember when we moved to Canmore, which is like, Canmore is just like 15 minutes from Banff.
Right.
So it's still like very much in the Rockies. And like looking around the first few days, I was just like looking up and it's like, wow, giant mountains everywhere. Like my first like 5 days, just constantly like appreciating looking at it. But after
I feel like
a
it's
year,
longer.
you still like notice them, but it's still like awesome to be able to look instead of like feeling boxed in by like skyscrapers like you do in a big city. You can see like, mountains and trees and beautiful sunsets, but they do kind of, it's like you go a week and then you're like, oh wow, it's cool that these mountains are like so gigantic and I stood on top of that one.
Yeah. So did you find living there, how long were you guys there for? Like a little over a year, I guess?
Yeah, we were there for 15 months.
So did you find after a while that you kind of stopped getting out and being active in that area and just like fell into like a routine, or did you kind of always like just get out into the mountains and do hikes and stuff?
For me, I definitely didn't hike as much as I probably would have liked to.
I still hiked quite a bit. I mean, yeah, so I hiked quite a bit, but it's just like not comparable to so many people who are there for like, they're on a 3-month work visa, they're passing through and they literally want to hike like every single day, or it's the winter and they have come for a ski season and they are going to the mountain every single day.
Right.
So yeah, I think that it kind of went through waves for me. Like we moved there and we hiked a ton and then kind of like settled into routine. And then we're like, oh wow, we live here. Should probably get outside a bit more. And then get back on it for a while, kind of fall back off, get back on it. But there's lots of like little small mountains. Like there's one right in Banff called Tunnel Mountain, which is like 25 minutes to go up. And I did that quite a bit with like coworkers and friends and stuff.
Okay.
So have you started planning your trip to Banff and Canmore, or Banff, Lake Louise?
Yeah, I have. It's just going to be me and a couple of my buddies that are going. Christina, this will actually be the first trip I take that Christina doesn't go, just because we're taking a big trip to Slovenia next summer as well. And so she's already taken all her time off for that trip. So I figured, I've got the time off. And I originally was going to go solo, and then I decided to ask a couple of my buddies to come along. So the plan as of right now, and I've already got a couple things booked, is we're going to stay at a little bed and breakfast for a couple nights in Banff. And I bought a couple of books about hikes in the area that I still haven't really dug into. And then we were going to go to Golden, BC, to the Kicking Horse Resort. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that area at all. We wanted to do this big whitewater rafting trip there. It's like a whole 8-hour thing. And then we were going to do some mountain biking there at in Golden.
That'd be awesome.
And so I found a really nice little cabin there with a pool table and everything. This will be a nice hangout for us. And the original goal, I kind of wanted to also make it up into Jasper, but it's just it seemed like such a long drive to get up there. So I'm thinking we're maybe just going to base ourselves in the Lake Louise, Banff, and Golden area, maybe a couple days in Canmore toward the end of it.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. I mean, Jasper's super cool. The drive up there is really beautiful, but I think too there's like benefits from like staying somewhere longer. You can definitely get like a bit more settled and get a good feel for the place. Yeah, for sure. That's one thing we've kind of learned as we've traveled is we much more enjoy when we're spending, at least 4 nights in one place rather than like when we were in Switzerland, we were jumping from place to place. Like we'd stay here 2 nights and we move on to the next place for 2 nights and we stay in the next place for 1 night. And it was good in that we got to see a lot, but we also weren't really getting a feel for anything. And so since then, we've kind of like made sure we set up camp for a little while and really get to know a place.
And what drew you to plan a trip to Slovenia?
Gosh, I don't know. I'm just always reading blogs and looking at travel pictures and just something about the look of Slovenia. Like it seemed to have everything. Like it's got the mountains that I love. And then of course, like Lake Bled area looks amazing. And the Sotra River is just like that emerald blue river that you can go whitewater rafting on. Looks incredible. And just looking at pictures of it kind of drew me to it. And then the more I researched it, kind of the more I just like fell in love with it. So
that's awesome.
I'm probably more excited about that trip than I've been about anything for a long time. Oh. And it's such a small country, and we're going to spend all of our time in Slovenia. Like we're not going to, hop into Croatia or northern Italy or anything. We just want to really get to know Slovenia for a couple of weeks.
That's awesome. Ryan went in last February.
Yeah, but I just went to Ljubljana. And,
okay. Did you like it?
Yeah, it's an amazing little city. I want to go back as well in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, he messaged me from there and he's like, once we're working remotely and we can be anywhere in the world, we should come spend a summer in Slovenia. So
yeah, that would be incredible.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty cool place. The photos look spectacular.
Yes, they do.
What is like if you had to pick like one favorite place you've been so far, what do you think that would be?
Hands down, it was Iceland. Iceland was incredible. There's really no other place on earth like that, like Iceland. It's the first thing that really struck me about Iceland when we were there, aside from the fact that like the sun never set, which was pretty crazy, was that there were no trees anywhere. And so like you could just see in like all directions, like forever and ever. Like you'd be driving down the road and you'd see this mountain like on the horizon or something, and you'd be driving for like 3 hours and you're still seeing that same mountain just getting like, slightly larger or whatever. But just the views, because of the lack of trees there, was very bizarre, almost like an alien kind of landscape.
Yeah, I remember that about being in Iceland too. Like I remember taking photos from we went to like the waterfall that's on the Golden Circle tour and taking photos of like the glaciers that were in the distance and trying to like get photos was so interesting because they looked so clear to me, like I could see them, but then my camera couldn't really capture them because they were still so far away.
Yeah, we really enjoyed we did some really nice hikes there. We did this one hike. It was called Reykjadalur. It's in a little city just outside of Reykjavik called Hveragurdi. And so this hike took us up into this, they call it Reykjadalur is Icelandic, the Smoke Valley. And they call it the Smoke Valley because there are like these vents all over the mountainside that just like belch out this sulfurous, like rotten egg smelling like steam everywhere. And then you've got bubbling mud pots all along the hike. And then when you get to the very top, there's like this boiling hot river that merges with like a freezing cold, like glacial melt river. And right where they merge, it's like the perfect temperature. And so you just kind of get into the river there in the warm water and kind of sit and soak for a little bit. And that was like a really surreal experience. But it's really, really cool.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
So you think like Iceland is just this like massive contrast to like anywhere you've been before? Is that what made it so interesting for you? Yeah,
it was just very different. I mean, the look of it was different. Like you don't see that type of landscape really anywhere else with that, with the moss just growing over everything and the massive waterfalls and glaciers and volcanoes. Like there's not too many places on Earth that you really get to see all those things in just one little country. Yeah, and Iceland's also cool because it's there's like discount air carriers that go there, so it's not too expensive to go. Yeah. Yeah, especially flying from like the East Coast, they've got a lot of like WoW Air, I think, has a lot of cheap stops out there. It's a little more difficult getting there from Houston because there's no directs. We had to fly into Toronto and then out of Toronto to onward.
Yeah, we flew Toronto to New York and then New York to Iceland.
Okay. And how long did you guys stay?
We only stayed there for a couple days. It was we were not really like planning to go. We were just like trying to get over to Europe. And then Ryan's like, oh, I've heard it's like really cheap if we can fly Iceland Air to get over there. And so we looked in and so we booked a flight from Calgary to Toronto, Toronto through New York, New York to Iceland, and then onwards to London. And you can just make your layover whatever you want with Iceland Air. So I think we just stayed for like 4 days or 3 days.
Yeah, we just had like a 4-day layover.
Right. Yeah, I talked to a lot of people that had done that. That's like a real popular thing, just to do the stopover there.
Yeah, I think it's really smart what they're doing with the tourism because it's like, or doing with the airlines by making them a little bit cheaper because they're getting tourism into their country. And I mean, we got there and we're like, I had no expectations for Iceland. Like I knew nothing about it. I didn't really know anyone who had been at the time, and showing up, I was like, wow, this is like a whole nother world. Like it is a really cool place. Yeah. Yeah. And that has done huge things for their tourism. I mean, I think I was talking to someone that lives there and he said that tourism has grown by like 300% just in like the last 3 years. Like you can't really go anywhere there without just massive hordes of, tourists pouring off of tour buses or whatever. You kind of have to strategically time your visits to the real like popular sites if you don't want to be overrun with the tour bus crowd. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How did you guys travel around Iceland?
We rented a car, which was super expensive. Like it was the most expensive thing we've ever done, just to rent a car for the 10 days. But we don't really like to do the like tour bus thing.
Yeah. Just
because we kind of like to have the place to ourselves, I guess. So yeah, we rented a car and we wanted to do the whole ring road, like make our way around the whole island, but people said we'd be a little rushed if we tried to do that in just the 10 days we had. So we stuck to the south and the southwest and then on up into the west fjords. So we just kind of split our time between those areas.
That's awesome. And did you guys camp or did you stay in like B&Bs or hotels?
We stayed in a mixture of apartments and hotels there.
Cool. Do you guys use Airbnb at all?
Yeah, we love Airbnb. We've stayed in some really cool places using them in Portland. Stayed in some really nice places. And we try and do apartments or houses whenever we can. Sometimes it's just not as convenient.
Mm-hmm.
It's more convenient to get a hotel room instead. But when we can, we try and feels like it's more, you kind of get a more authentic experience, I think, when you're staying in like a residence. You get a feel for that more residential area rather than a more crowded city type of downtown area.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that. It's cool to arrive. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Is that how you guys kind of travel as well? You stay like in houses and.
Lately, we've been doing Airbnb on just the couple trips we've done since we've been down here. When we were in South, both our longer trips, we really just hosteled the entire time, except for like, I think 1 week in Peru, we got an Airbnb just to get like a break from staying in dorm rooms.
Right.
That was our first like experience with Airbnb. I didn't even have an Airbnb profile before, I guess like June of 2014. Like Ryan had kind of been like, oh, this thing's like becoming popular. Have you heard of it? And I was like, nah, I don't really know. And then, Peru was my first experience. Was that your first experience as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were just like, oh, wow, this is so cool. Like we had this small little apartment to ourselves, this like little kitchen setup, bathroom. It's really a great service. I love it.
Yeah. And I think as we get like, I think the next time we go on a bigger trip, we'll probably be doing a bit more of that and a bit less of hosteling as we're getting older. We're getting like out of the dorm room age and into the Airbnb age.
Yeah, I think it's nice to be able to like sleep fully through the night. Like that's something in hostels that there's always people coming and going. You don't always sleep the best, and it's nice because it's affordable and it's a great way to meet people. But it is nice to have your own space for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. So we sort of started traveling in our late 20s when we're already kind of at the point where we're like, we don't really want to share a space with like a bunch of strangers at this point. Like we're an old married couple essentially. Obviously.
Yeah, it's hard too when you're like we don't party very much anymore. So if we want to go to bed at like 10 or 11, it's like way easier to do if you have your own space than if you're in a hostel dorm.
Definitely.
So after Slovenia, what's kind of on your radar for trips in the future?
We were actually talking last night. We were kind of looking at Airbnbs for Estonia. We want to do Finland and like Tallinn, Estonia for Christmas, this coming Christmas. So we always want to see the Northern Lights. And cool. So I kind of figured getting up into the Finnish Lapland might be our best chance at doing that. So it was crazy. We kind of want to split our time between Finland and Estonia. And I was looking at, we saw those, I don't know if you've seen those, like glass topped igloos that are real like popular in Finland where
I've seen photos of them. They look really cool.
So we were like looking into those. We really wanted to do that, like be there on like Christmas Eve and Christmas night and just kind of, lay under the stars and see the Northern Lights. And so we looked at it and it was going to be like $1,500 for the 2 nights there. So we're like, oh shit. Like, so we started looking more Airbnb type of cabins and they were significantly cheaper. And then when we looked at Estonia, it was just like rock bottom prices for like the nicest looking, like old refurbished kind of places. So, but that's awesome. What's next on the radar. We've talked about, we really want to do New Zealand at some point. I don't know when we're going to have time to do that. We've always wanted to go to Tofino, British Columbia. Mm-hmm. That's always really appealed to us. And I know we might be taking some trips to Colorado this year just because my brother and his family moved out there. So that gives us an excuse to go get in the mountains a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. Do you guys do any like skiing or snowboarding? No, we've never actually. Christina skied when she was younger, but
I've never really been on skis or snowboard. I tried it when I was visiting our friends in Canada. That one time I got on a snowboard and immediately like fell off. And, this like Southern Texas guy trying to snowboard first time, like I kind of just gave up at that point, but I would love to be able to learn. I'm sure eventually we'll give it a try.
Yeah, definitely. If you've got family in Colorado, I feel like that's a cool opportunity to go out there in the winter and do that.
Yeah, definitely.
So just Christina obviously like shares your love of travel. Do you guys sort of like fall in love with travel at the same time? We're laughing at your cat in the background.
Yeah. Dr. Claw over here with my white cat at my side. Yeah, we kind of fell in love with travel at the same time. I guess we sort of had the same situation. It was never really on our radar to travel at all. And we both just kind of fell in love with it. As soon as we got to Switzerland, our first trip overseas, we were both just kind of like, whoa, we're in like foreign soil for the first time ever. And just immediately kind of fell in, like never wanted to stop traveling essentially after that.
Yeah. Have you guys thought about just like quitting your jobs and taking off? Is that something you guys ever talk about or not really?
I mean, we've talked about it, but it's immediately struck down because it's like, okay, like, how are we going to support ourselves if we do that?
Yeah.
I've thought about ways to make it happen so that I could travel more. I applied to be, I did a job interview to teach overseas, like teach at an international school overseas. So I kind of like thought about doing that for a while. And it's like, I don't know. It's hard for Christina to leave her job just because she's doing really well and we've got all our family here. So we're just trying to be happy with taking our trips a few times a year and just kind of living the normal life in between it.
Yeah. No, I think that's cool. Like I talk to so many people who that is their life. And I think that it's really interesting to find a balance between like having your life at home and your routine and then still having that like adventure and that travel. Is there anything that you recommend to people who would like to travel more, like sort of in your situation where you guys are pretty settled, have good jobs that you want to stay in, and they just like don't really know how to start traveling?
I would say the first thing you want to do is just start saving, like have a plan, get you a savings account, just start with one, get you a savings account and just label it travel fund and put your $5 or $10 a day in there, and then start, looking at blogs and start looking at what kind of places look beautiful to you and think about what are the things you like to do and just start planning in that way, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good advice for sure. I think it's kind of just like, I think there's fear attached for a lot of people. Like they're kind of scared of the uncertain, which is something I completely understand. I mean, I get like nervous and frightened when I don't know what's going to come next, but I feel like I'm kind of always just like pushed on because I know that it'll be great once I'm there. And I think that's because I've been before, whereas like other people who haven't gone away don't necessarily like know that feeling.
Yeah. And that fear is always going to be there. I think even people that travel very frequently still have that sort of, sense of uneasiness when you first get to a new place. But for me personally, that's kind of part of what like drives me to keep traveling. I enjoy that sense of discomfort that comes from being somewhere unfamiliar and where you don't really speak the language. It's almost like a puzzle or a challenge to try and, figure your way out in a new place, I guess.
So you travel, you probably travel the most out of like your co-working group and social group?
Yeah, probably.
What's the reaction from them, like from your family? Like, whoa, you're really traveling a lot. You're really using your savings on going out and doing experiences instead of like following kind of the normal course for a lot of people.
I don't know. I think people just think it's kind of cool. They enjoy hearing our stories and listening, looking at our pictures and everything like that. I wouldn't say that they have any sort of unusual reactions to it or anything. my parents are, of course, always just kind of awestruck at the amount, every time we go visit them, we're like, oh yeah, we're going to be going to Nicaragua next month. We're just sort of like blown away by how much we travel, because it's such a relatively recent thing, I guess. And it's shocking to them that we've sort of changed our lifestyle this way.
Yeah, I think it's really great how you're able to continue to invest in experiences instead of in stuff. Because I know when we were living in Calgary working, and I feel like it's sometimes hard to maintain that mindset where you're like, okay, I really want to continue to invest in experiences instead of just going out for dinner with your friends and spending your money in other ways, because you're not really thinking of the long-term future about the things you could do with it.
Yeah, you kind of have to make a choice, like what is going to make you the most happy? Are you happiest by sacrificing all those material goods and taking all the trips, or are you just happier, purchasing all the things that you want and just living your life at home? So I guess it depends on the person, which of those types of things is more important.
Is Nicaragua probably like the least developed or like sketchiest place you will have traveled to?
Yeah, definitely. So we're a little bit nervous about that, just because we've never really been that far out of our comfort zone. We always travel in Europe, where everything is orderly and well established, and there's no corrupt police force anywhere. And just from what I've read about Nicaragua, it's relatively safe, but they're still a developing country. And I've read that sort of like if you're a gringo driving a car down there, that the police will just pull you over for some bogus traffic violation and basically like shake you down, make you go to an ATM and pay the fine on the spot or whatever. So we've sort of tried to make it a little easier on ourselves for our first go around by getting a driver to take us, like a local, to take us where we want to go. And we're just kind of dipping our toes in it, I guess, for the first time, and see how it goes.
Yeah, definitely. Do you guys speak any Spanish?
Very, very little. Just the niceties, hello and thank you and please and those kind of things.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
So you guys took Spanish lessons. Are you pretty fluent, or are you still working on that?
I'd say I'm intermediate.
Yeah.
When we got back, I kind of stopped working at it for a while once we got back to Canada, and then like really got into it again for a few months leading up to the summer. And then since I've been down here in Georgia, haven't really been practicing as much.
Yeah, see, I'm so jealous of that. We've always wanted to learn a language, and I can just never, I can never find the time to do it. We learn just a few of the basic pleasantries whenever we go somewhere, but to be able to have a conversation in another language is just something we both have always wanted to do. So that's amazing. You guys have been able to kind of do that.
Yeah. It's still not quite where, like, at least I'd like it to be. Like, I'd love to be able to be, fluent. I think that'd be awesome. So moving and eventually like living in a Spanish speaking country is definitely on our kind of bucket list, so that we can get to that point.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you're going down to Nicaragua in February, because before Ryan got the job opportunity in Georgia, Central America was our plan. So had his visa been denied, we would have been in like Central America right now.
Yeah.
Could have been doing this interview in Nicaragua.
So with the plan to kind of just like be down there long term, like spend a little, sort of like you did with South America.
Yeah. So we were going to just try to work on creating businesses online from Nicaragua, and just kind of like move there, since our savings would go so much farther there than they do.
Yeah, that's a great place to do it. I feel like get in before because it's sort of like becoming, like from what I hear, like going to be the next Costa Rica eventually. So if you could get in there before like the big tourism hits and have yourself established, you could really somehow make that really lucrative for yourself, I feel like.
Yeah, we thought it'd be cool too to have kind of like a place where we could kind of like set up shop so it was easier for us to work, and then we could just take trips from there and like really explore through Central America that way.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah. Anyways, it was great talking. We don't want to take up any more of your time today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It's really an honor to be on here. I've been such a listener, and it's really exciting for me to be on the show.
Yeah, it's super cool to have somebody who like we met as a fan of the show and then have you on to talk about your passions for travel. That's super cool for us.
Great. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the show and got some valuable tips from Justin. As always, you can find the show notes on theworldwanderers.com.
Yeah, and join us on social media, The World Wanderers on Facebook and The World Wanderers 1 on Twitter.
Just couldn't get the actual one.
Just search The World Wanderers, you'll find us.
Yeah, and definitely go check out some of Justin's photos on his website and on Instagram.
Yeah, and while you're on our website looking at the show notes for Justin's episode, go to the newsletter tab, sign up for our newsletter, and we will send you weekly updates on pretty much everything World Wanderers. But the coolest part is that you'll get a really awesome, super condensed guide. That's all I'll tell you.
To South America.
Oh, I wanted to keep that part a secret.
Well, they would.
Yeah, it's pretty fun little guide. So if South America is somewhere you want to travel, somewhere you have traveled, you don't care about South America, but you like to learn, definitely go sign up for it and we'll send you the book for free. As well as if you enjoy the podcast and you want to give us some support, check out patreon.com/The World Wanderers. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Thanks. Till next time.